Hi everyone, welcome to the next installment of Charts in Perspective, where we use charts to dive into the world of economics and financial markets. I'm Jennifer Nash, an economic and market research analyst for Vetify. Today we're going to examine the Big Four recession indicators. Official recession calls are the responsibility of the NBER Business Cycle Dating Committee, who is understandably vague about the specific indicators on which they base their decisions. There is, however, a general belief that there are four big indicators that the committee weighs heavily in their cycle identification process. Those indicators are non-farm employment, industrial production, real retail sales, and real personal income. So let's take a closer look at these four and dive into the charts. This chart and table illustrate the performance of the Big Four since the end of the most recent recession. The NBER declared the COVID recession to be just 2 months, ending in April 2020. The data seen here shows the cumulative percent change since the official end of the recession. So, what do we notice about each of the Big Four's behavior over the past few years? First, retail sales bounced back most rapidly, most likely due to pent up demand and savings by consumers at the start of the pandemic. However, consumer spending has leveled off over the past few years as high interest rates, dwindled savings, and elevated inflation have had a major impact on spending habits. Then, industrial production showed the second fastest recovery. But then producers and suppliers struggled with limited inventory and supply chain issues. And like retail sales, it's leveled off over the past few years. Next, we have employment, which has slowly and steadily improved since the official end of the recession, and it continues to do so. And lastly, real income. It's had the weakest recovery, but it also continues to gradually improve. Now here we have the same chart, but it shows the performance of the Big Four since the end of the Great Recession, with the data showing the cumulative percent change since June 2009. Note the major difference in real income between this chart and our last. Since the COVID recession, real income has grown the least, but since the Great Recession, it's actually grown the most. But this should come as no surprise, considering that over the past few years, inflation has been at its highest level since the early 80s. But these two charts don't really show us the individual behavior of the Big Four leading up to any of these recessions. To achieve that goal, I've plotted the same data using a percent off high technique. In other words, I've marked new highs as 0, and then showed the percentage drops for months that don't hit new highs. By using this method, it's easier to see and compare the declines for each indicator over time. At the end of June, non-farm employment and real personal income were at all-time highs. Industrial production was 0.11% off its all-time high, and real retail sales were 3.62% off of its all-time high. Now let's examine the behavior of these four indicators starting at the turn of the century. Rather than having four separate charts, I've overlaid the four to help us evaluate the relative behavior of them at the cycle peaks and troughs. This chart here is an excellent starting point for evaluating the relevance of the four indicators in the context of three very different recessions. In all instances, the bounce in industrial production and retail sales matches the recession trough, while employment and personal income lagged in their respective reversals. As for the start of these three 21st century recessions, the indicator declines are less uniform in their behavior. We can see, however, that employment and personal income were laggards in the declines. And finally, for sharp-eyed viewers, here's a cluttered chart dating back to 1959, the earliest date for which data on all four indicators is available. Admittedly, this chart is very congested, but the main takeaway is the diverse patterns and volatility for these indicators across time. For example, it's easy to see that retail sales and industrial production, the green and purple lines, are far more volatile than employment and income, the red and blue lines. Now, so far, we've focused on the Big Four individually, either separately or overlaid. But now we're going to look at them as an aggregate. In this chart, I've created an index by equally weighing the four and indexing them to 100 with a 1959 start date. I've used a log scale to give an accurate indication of growth and added an exponential regression to help us see the secular patterns of faster and slower growth. We've been below the regression line for over the past 15 years. Now let's use the percent off high technique that we used a few slides ago on this aggregate index. Immediately, we can see that it's completely worthless as a leading indicator of recessions. Instead, we can construct a better leading indicator by plotting the average of the percent off highs for each of the four. Here we've highlighted the months when all four indicators were at all-time highs with the green dots. The dashed red line shows that at recession starts, the average of the percent off high of the four indicators has been 0.91% on average from an all-time high. For a closer look, we've narrowed the time frame in our next chart. The average set an all-time high in November 2014 and was just 0.03% away from setting a new one in November 2018. As of June, the latest average is 0.93% off the new high, just below the recession start average of 0.91%. Could this mean that we're headed towards another recession? Maybe. But we have been floating in this range for the past 2 years with no recession call yet, so maybe not. One thing's for sure, we'll continue to keep a close eye on what the big four indicators are telling us. That's all for our discussion. Thank you for tuning in. For more economic and market insights, you can find my content regularly on the Advisor Perspectives website under the AP Chart section.